Hello and welcome to the Gnostic Warrior radio show and podcast, broadcasting from GnosticWarrior.com in San Diego, California to around the world. I'm your host Mo, and today on the show we have Sevan Bomar. Sevan has been considered a leader in the occult, esoteric, and spiritual online movement for several years now. He operates the very popular websites Resistance2010.com and AstralQuest.com. This is a jam-packed podcast, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. But before we get into the podcast, here's a quick word from our new sponsor.
For a great mobile website by expert web designers, visit WeCreateWebDesigns.com. Get your website now for only $79 at WeCreateWebDesigns.com.
How you doing today, Sevan? How's life treating you there in Costa Rica?
Man, I'm doing absolutely great. Obviously, I'm out here in Costa Rica. It's one of those beautiful sunny days, and I got tons of energy in me today, and just excited about the call, just on the Gnostic radio.
No, and I'm glad to have you on, Sevan. I've been watching your work and seeing you on many other podcasts, videos, and the great work you've been doing on AstralQuest.com over the years. And I know guys like you and myself that are busy creating and producing, we get a little bit busy where it's kind of hard for us to see everybody else and see what they're doing. I'm a fan of your work and the great love and knowledge and truth that you're spreading around the world.
Oh, man, thanks. I mean, I think it's all of as the same kind as far as bringing information, and we're all at our different bases and stations, as I call it. And it's just interesting because, we get to moving so fast, we kind of see each other's work, and then we're like, oh, okay, yeah, and then that person again. And so it's just awesome, though, when you have a show, because you could actually, bring those people on and talk to them and get them to, maybe even spit out some new stuff. And that's also kind of what we're about more than anything, is that each one of these shows will always contain maybe sometimes a bit, but these days a bit much of new information. And I guess that's just because, there's a lot of information becoming available rapidly. Obviously, one keyword leads to another keyword, and just us having access to the internet and people who are also on that same vibration and frequency, you just go and look up something, and it may have been yesterday that if you would have looked it up, it would have come back with nothing. And then you look it up today and someone's put in an entry and started talking about it. So I feel excited, of course, to just be involved in this age that we're in now.
I agree. We're definitely blessed to be involved and to be creators of light and truth in a time where we're allowed to do such a thing. And I do agree, Sevan, that we're interconnected, and we seem to be able to reach out to one another and connect, whether that be via our words, videos, or through these podcasts. So it's great to see your work for 3 years, and then all of a sudden here I am talking to you and getting to share. And like you had said, every podcast, even though I've listened to several of yours, I've seen videos, articles, and then the other guests that I've had on over the year, I always learn something new or ask a question that opens up a new door. So it's great. And one of the first things that I'd like to focus on for the audience, Sevan, is your move from being an American and living in America all your life and then making the huge transition to Costa Rica. Can you explain that briefly before we get into your great work?
Oh, for sure. Well, obviously, I decided to move from the U.S. quite some time ago, about 4 years ago. And that was actually after a massive spiritual awakening. So I'm not, in a sense, just throwing America under the bus, because, America also includes Costa Rica and also Brazil and Peru and all the different places from south to north. But I left North America and just to get out of that particular frequency and that particular matrix. But I did have my awakening there, though, too. So I can't, and much of my experiences in life have been in the U.S., so I can't, of course, like I say it's just the worst place ever to be. But I came to Costa Rica, however, because there's just a lot more connection. You're really at the center. And if you understand America, or the Americas is an entire body. And so you have the top part, which is north, then you have its waist, which is Central America, and then you have its feet, which is South America. And so being at the waist, in a sense, allows more of a radiant spread of the information, meaning that a lot of the stuff that comes from here and the feeling and the energy and vibration that you get from nature allows you to really work from people from the inside out. So thus we kind of coined the term understanding. But that first had to happen on me first, and that happened here in Costa Rica. And I absorbed just the environment that is here and allowed that to change my DNA and RNA. And obviously took myself out of an environment where I was speaking English all the time, and did something that also, I feel like there's this moment that to get to the next level of our consciousness, we have to go somewhere by ourselves where we don't know anybody and we don't necessarily have that physical support system. So that way you can test the line to see if you really believe in yourself. And then obviously when you make it through, then you get that much more strength, depthhood, maturity, and belief in yourself.
Yeah, that's interesting that you relate the Americas as being one body, and then we have North America, which would be Canada and the United States, and then we have Middle America, which you could say would be Mexico, Central America, and so forth, and then South America. And they all have a different role, do you feel, in the management of the earth and what they're doing, as well as their governments? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, obviously there'll be a lot of as above, so below, and then sometimes you'll see some pieces put in the wrong place. But the general concept is that anytime you divide regions, as these regions have been divided, they were divided into bodies, which is basically phi-based pentagram geometry. And then the top of them was, of course, the top crown point, and then the foot of them was, of course, what we would call the netherworld, or the place that things are cultivated. So in a nutshell, what you have with this same blueprint or design is that it works on a more of a macro scale. The world also is set up the same way. And then ad infinitum, as far as we could think. And this, of course, you see in a great deal of the stuff like Freemasonry, where they're utilizing a blueprint that is basically a diagram of the body. And it's a term that's often used that you should not reinvent the wheel in society, right? They say, oh, don't reinvent the wheel. And that's because the wheel is really known as the body, or phi, 72 degrees times 5, 360 degrees. That's a pentagram, etc. And so in not reinventing the wheel, you'll find these larger blueprints, such as America, and even smaller blueprints, such as maybe the White House, or even a coin even could have an entire layout of what a body would have, which, of course, chakra centers, processing center for your food, bowels, those kind of things.
Gotcha. And would this similar mapping be found in Egypt? And we're just a more modern society that has taken this worldwide in all these different structures that are around the world. So basically, the way the countries are set it up, they've got it down to a science with not only the symbols, but the gods and the goddesses that are ruling over those said countries. So you'd said that you were awoken in America, which, of course, I'm here now, and I believe I was awoken as well. And I believe that we're under the spell of Isis. And again, this is just kind of my theory here, and that's who we find in New York Harbor with the Statue of Liberty. And right. They use a sort of magic to rule over us, so we don't really know who we are, but they also, at the same time, they leave the tools, they leave everything there that if we want to find the truth, we can find the truth, and the truth will set us free, just like it said on the CIA building.
Right, well, the truth's inside, so obviously if you find yourself, you'll find this blueprint, and if you can find yourself getting to perfection, then you'll find the blueprint in perfection, the real one. Beyond that, you have different kinds of bodies after a while. Obviously, you're right. They're utilizing the ISIS, or basically the ISS, or $ platform in the United States. And then in Egypt, Kim, I'm not sure if we've actually reached the modern level of Kim. But what I will say is that they were more focusing on a diamond body, which is very impervious to damage, and that's just from all levels. But what you're dealing with that kind of phi-based structure, where the phi is taken into a diamond shape, rather than its pentagram or dodecahedron shape, that's again the knowledge that you would be dealing with. So all the geometry that relates to that, and then you have these multiple pyramids that are built, and then the idea of what it's used for is completely changed if you think about it. Because in Egypt you see these buildings constructed for multiple reasons, and then you see in the U.S. it may just be the courthouse or maybe the arena or amphitheater, and it's just used to draw energy and to pull energy or to push energy. And so I would definitely say within something like Egypt, you're getting more of where there's a practice of how to construct a diamond body, which is really more of the platform that your soul is on, versus a body for more of your astral stuff or ethereal stuff, more so than the physical, which is obviously the pentagram and its connection to physicality. So that's why you always see the pentagram interlacing with the six-pointed star or what's called the diamond, because when you get those two together, then you get the birth. And that's, of course, 6 + 5 = 11. And this brings us into another age in a certain tense and brings an entirely different kind of design, but mainly one that's based on duality. So if you, in the ancient times, which again would be more like the modern times for where people are now in their consciousness, you would think of these different stages, and then anything that you wanted to create, you would know what necessary stages or the incubation inside the cube, basically incubation stages that you needed to take it through in order to manifest what it is that you were looking to manifest. It wasn't out of order in a sense, meaning that you just didn't say, okay, give me anything, and then something will pop out.
Gotcha. And in regards to the power structure and the energy vortexes and the way that America has been set up, it's more of for the powers that be, whether that be in Washington, D.C., to draw from the energy of the peoples towards their power structures or whatever they want to create.
Right. Well, if you can imagine when the land was completely bare, because, we have to be very clear here, because you can get people into hating the land, which obviously is not responsible for the situation that has occurred on top of it. But in every tense, it's, if you can imagine the land just like what you would see here in Costa Rica and in any country that there's not an excessive amount of building going on, you would see a lot of wildlife. And then you would get these areas that are very rich, obviously the points or the meridian points that are in our hands and different things like that, like the ley lines, et cetera, give us more of a map of where these locations are. But you would find areas that clearly something was going on. And then if you got the sensitive would tell you, oh, this area is very rich in, and there's either one energy or another generally. And those areas would be marked, but generally they will already be geologically marked. You would know, okay, something's weird about this place, that plant's growing in a spiral, etc. So now what we find on those areas, because those are, of course, were areas that over time, because we've still been on this planet for thousands of years, over time, there were always temple structures. Maybe the most famous person would build their home there. Everyone would try to get that spot while they were here in 3D. And then put everything that they had that was valuable on it, and then they would perish, and then the next person would take over the spot. And so now what you have going on is in those same spots, yes, you do have, like I said, amphitheaters, malls, different kind of things that are attracting people for oblivious reasons, obviously, when you think about it after a while, but it still has some kind of magnetic attraction, and that's 100% of one of the reasons why.
Is it just for the earthly realm, or in the astral realm? Is there anything being played by the powers that be with the gods? Is there any kind of demons that are coming back and forth, or is that just a play on words and we're all one in its energy? And then another question to compound that one, I'm sorry, Sevan, would be DNA, because I know you had talked about that recently, and with all of us having different haplogroups, and even though we're all made of the chemical substances, we're all kind of playing our own tune. And it's important that we look within and we find that tune and we play it, but we're all in the same band together. Would you agree with that theory?
Oh, for sure. But, the world's inside out. Like that statement, I could only say, well, both. And the reason why is because in the dualistic plane, you'll find there's often two truths. And so what I would say definitely is that if you think of us inside out as souls, there's, in a sense, no hands. So there is no even interaction with 3D, because in 3D, you need hands to start building and constructing and to interact, right? So in a sense, the hands are the soul's expression of wanting to interact in a three-dimensional environment. And so there's different plays on that, though. Some say that, oh, well, that's because they've set up vehicles or bodies for us to be trapped in, and then we get in there, and then there's all this different rhetoric. But I just like to stick to the facts and stick to the point.
Sure.
The point is that obviously there are two worlds. There's a spiritual world, and then there's a physical world. You have access to both. That automatically makes you an evangel, bodhisattva, messiah, whatever you want to call it. It's just a person that can walk in what's called the subjective plane and the objective plane. And so really what we're working on more than anything now is gaining more access to our own personal, not other people's, because you'll see that that's the plane that everyone is already connected. Gaining access to your personal subjective plane so that way you can have access to limitlessness. Because if you think about it, in this reality, it has rules to it, because if you move certain things like the dimension spatial out of place, if someone flies, it will actually cause the phenomena that will eventually kill all of the life in the ocean. Because once we can fly, then we will assume we can do other things. And you see, you'll graduate a world that is already basically solid and teeming in the ecosystem because you added one extra ability that people don't realize, that if you want to fly, you go to the subjective plane, meaning you go to your dream world, lucid dream. Obviously, is dream world first for the beginners, lucid dream for the intermediates. That means you can control the dream. And then astral plane, meaning that you actually have what you would think as a physical body in another world for the advanced. You see what I mean? So that's the space that I'm of course, telling people now, because obviously I have time to do a lot of things, but less time these days to get on the radio and talk about it. You see what I mean? And that's, of course, the difference between action and just words. But really, that's what we're dealing with here, is that the astral plane is where you gather a great deal of data, especially in relation to what I'm talking about. But that will come through experience, which, of course, is the real teacher. It is also where there is no limits. You can fly, you can use telepathy, you can communicate with a great deal of other individuals. What we're actually calling at times individuals are just coalesce points of energy that actually contain information. So this means that I can go to an individual and get the information that I need from them without them even knowing that I was there, because of their level of being awake. Like if I ask you, did you see me in the dream last night? The person saying, well, no, I didn't see you. That's not my fault. That wouldn't be my fault if I could see that individual. It'd be because the person doesn't have clear sight. So obviously the world is designed, and there's a culprit here. The world is designed to deactivate the general abilities that create the bridge for you, in a sense, to understand these abilities that I'm speaking of, and actually give you the abilities. And that would be how you would understand it. So again, the bridge is collapsed. So the corpus callosum in the center of the brain, which is known as the bridge, is burned out. And this is because there's a constant fight between the left and the right side, right? Left and right side of the brain constantly war. Well, what happens when the bridge that they keep using to take across all of their weapons collapse? And now there's no movement, no communication, no nothing. So what I'm explaining to everyone is that the center of the brain, which is how we would generally function in balance to have this ability to operate in two worlds in perfection, has been burned out through the advice, because your question was earlier, are there other spirits or demons or Anunnaki or whatever here? Yes. Who are they? Some people say, well, who are they? They are us. And somebody said, what do you mean by that? All is self. There's nothing here that is actually separate than us. But to explain them deeper, if you go through these incarnations, through these different planetary spheres, you have certain experiences that create different types of chips, meaning damage in your actual form and structure. Your vibration, tone, and frequency can resonate something like jealousy. Okay? Now, if you notice that jealousy is an energy that if a person has it, it burns them up in the inside to see someone else do something great, right? And then while we may all say that we've all escaped that, some people we easily say, I'm never jealous. The God of the Bible didn't seem to escape it. It's Deuteronomy, what is it, 15 and something, that, God is a jealous God, and wants to, or Deuteronomy 6 and 15, yeah. He's jealous God, anger burns against us. So they're using the same terminology because there's a monopoly now. There's a real estate in a tense that is being sought out in your consciousness, in your mind, in your astral space now. Since on this planet, our land has also been divided. And I may be getting off topic here, but this kind of brings us back around to the beginning, because who was dividing up the land into these little cookie cutter bodies? Why would you want to bring division in something that's already together? And so we have to see that there's a lot of preliminary work that has been done in attempts to bring about such division and chaos within humanity. And the intellects that are involved are vast. So we too, in order to emancipate ourselves out of it, self-substantiate, would have to become vast intellects ourselves, meaning that we would have to gain some other level of knowledge that will put us into a position of being able to do something about this, rather than utilizing brute force or suggested methods that never work to cure such ailments within oneself. And then the reason why I say within ourselves is because at times we waste a lot of our own time by talking about what we're going to do for others and how we're going to help others, when if you're not perfected in yourself, the only thing that you'll do is go and really mess that person up more. Because once you get upset, or once you get angry, or once you show the flaw that it's still yet to be corrected, but to them, then the only thing they're going to do is learn either that flaw or be completely hurt because of that flaw. So this is about for those of us that are grasping this topic, because this was never simple anyway after it became complex. So what happens here is that we just, we gotta, I wanted to actually start this conversation today. I wanted to say that I want to have a real conversation and then turn that into a show. Meaning that I just want to talk to you, because I heard that you were also in Carlsbad at some point.
Yeah, that's where I live.
And then obviously I grew up around that area. I went to Vista High School. And
that's where my wife went, just so you know, Sevan.
Awesome. So my thing is that I know where I'm at in this space and time. I know a lot about what people are doing and who they really are. But more than anything, it takes me a minute to actually get all that information out, because I'm so like, okay, what are we going to say about this next topic? What are we going to do? But the moment that I can, in a certain sense, let the hair down, I can really give you the keys of how to emancipate yourself into another spatial, meaning getting yourself into that next stage of consciousness that was already promised to you when you were younger, meaning the idea that you had of what this life was really about and where things were really going to go when you were younger is really what is attempting to be wrestled from you, because that is what's actually keeping you young. So if you remember, when we thought about the future when we were younger, and we thought about what we were going to be doing, and we just had nothing but excitement. It was like, man, cars will be flying maybe, and this is, maybe we'll even be able to fly, all this stuff. And that's what gives us that drive. And as we get older and older, as we figure out that maybe partially there may be some lies going on after you're told you need to get a job and things like that. And then even further down the line, you figure out the money, et cetera. Then it gets a little bit more trickier. So let's go back again to talk about this land. The first time then that land is divided is the first time you're dealing with those who bring about division. So we'll talk about those later, and we'll just talk about the division of land. So then once land is cut, that's actually what starts creating separate people, because now, one person staying on another side is going to be subject to the conditions of that area. Okay. But here's the interesting thing about people who think they own land. When you buy a piece of land, they give you what? A deed. Right. And instead of going into all the sovereignty law and all of that, let's just think about the deed. You have now this piece of paper that says you own land. Right. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, you need to get off this land, you're going to say, no, I own it. And they're going to say, well, show me. And you're going to show them this piece of paper. But who is backing up that piece of paper? Who is really guaranteeing that piece of paper? Who is going to go if this person takes your land and then sends the enforcer, meaning someone who is now going to come enforce, not talk, to get this person off your land? It's going to be governments, and then you trace all that back, it's going to be the Jesuits. Okay, so this means that nobody really owns any land. What they own is a piece of paper that says that the enforcer will protect their land because they are under the dominion of that enforcer. So thus, none of the land is free. And that's what begins our entrapment here. That's what begins our impoverishedness. And the reason how I track this level of information also was from an entirely different angle. And it was through seeing this happen on the spiritual plane, watching how the Jesuits basically usurped the power of the netherworld with the character known as Jesus, who goes into hell and takes the keys from Satan or Sat. And people don't get that, but you have to realize that the previous tradition that was here on this planet, especially if you go to the east, you'll notice is Sat. Like they say in Sat Sam, Sat Nam, Sat, the name is truth. The name means truth. And that's because that was the father Saturn, okay? That's like, in a sense, the Old Testament. But the interesting part is when it says they took the keys. Now, what is the keys? The keys would have to be knowledge of some sort, right, in our book. But really, what is the whole game here about? The game is about souls. More precisely, spirits. So the only keys is how to take spirits. So now, if I say, well, knowledge, terminology such as you sold your soul to Satan, how is that different from give your soul to Jesus? So in one sense, maybe you would at least get paid. Now in another sense, you're actually just going to give it away. But what if you can't even do those kind of transactions? Who's authorizing you to trade something that it's not even been created? They're still trying to figure it out. And just like I know, it's the unbegotten. It'll always baffle anything in a three-dimensional world. Where does everything come from? It had to come from somewhere, but yet our existence tells us that that's not true. And it can really send your computer into a fry, meaning your head would just completely clash against itself and fry if you ever start to really contemplate that one statement about how us being here confirms that things actually come from nothing. Oh my goodness. So as we continue to move on, what we're now living with now in this society are spirits or beings who have taken over the netherworld. And I can't even tell you that it was going better. I'm still working on getting through the deeper annuals. You have to go down these tunnels of time. But I can't tell you it was better before. But I'm just telling you it's a new dominion now. The symbol is a P. That's the perish. Notice the term that they'll perish. Pulpit. They pull in pits. There's a bishop there indicating that there's also knights. There's also rooks, there's queens, there's kings, okay? And then there's a lot of terminology then that we're just not looking at, but there's an entire legion, as it's called, re-legion, meaning to bring back the soldiers into a legion that has already been depleted. An entire legion being built here of basically mind-controlled slaves, reading one book on a planet of millions of books. But even greater, minds that are constantly able to conceive things in real time, because books become just as outdated as the paper that they're written on. And so what happens here, though, is that's the spiritual war. That's where the clutch point is, because it's going to start there first. I think that was even David Icke that mentioned, why would we try to continuously stop something or change something from the hologram? We would have to go to the point in which it's emitting. And that's where he left it off. And now let's continue it from there. It's emitting from what we call the spiritual plane or the astral plane. And so what happens here below the speed of light, this is everything in 3D is below the speed of light, happened above the speed of light. That's why I said there's nothing new below the sun. So just past the sun on that other side, there's another firmament in which we have another replica of us in some other state. This is the dream character that constantly acts out and does things that begins to shape, mold, and fashion what happens to us in three-dimensional reality. So, and I'm not saying this for everyone to be afraid of what's happening to them on the spiritual plane, but for people to start thinking, okay, well, if that's possible, then that means that if I can gain control of my spiritual side and my dream world, then I can actually start gaining control of my physical reality. Yes, you can.
Are there other spirits that we're aligned to that are pushing us in a certain direction based on, what you had stated, the Jesuits and religion, which means to bind? I come from the Israelites and the Hebrews and the Greek Hellenes.
Let me explain. A great
Sure.
question, because there's many oaths, binds, pacts, and rituals. But what happens is it's really shells. Like, you have to understand it from the Kabbalistic, because they're going to get the most real on it, because they're the ones that designed this Metatron's cube, if you may, right? But what accumulates in the corner of the cube are shells, and these shells, in a certain sense, can hold an individual back. And because what they do is they basically become the mold that goes around you, right? And then they enclose you within this design of their own trapping, okay? And then from that point, unless you break that mold, which means you had to go into a high vibratory frequency, they basically become the shell that you're now incubating in. So it's a very interesting thing to also visualize, because you'll see life seems to go through its evolutionary process like that also. Like, a shell in itself is a calcium buildup, silica buildup. And so it's the same thing in a certain sense, but on an ethereal plane, is that you actually have energies that feel as if that there has been an agreement that you have been oath or bequeathed to them. And this is more common than not common, I'll tell you. And then what happens, though, is that this is a simple cable then. It's an ethereal cord that then goes from you to that person, just as or you to that entity, just as a dog has his owner has the leash. But then when the vibratory frequency of that individual goes high, i.e. activation, the shell cannot contain the individual. So the shell breaks. This also breaks the identity of the shell. The person then feels as if they are actually in a new world, that something has actually left or whatever, right? And then that is the next stage of their existence. However, I will also remind everyone, another shell begins to develop right away. Your next metamorphosis is already developing. The actual husk around you is already developing into the shape of what you're becoming through your actions of what you're doing here on the planet. This can also be seen with anyone with somewhat of a third eye open and a tadpole. You can, at a certain stage, begin to see the outside of a frog's body overshadowing the tadpole. So, and it's just becoming more and more dense as the tadpole begins to develop into what we call a full-grown frog.
Well, that's an interesting concept. I see the shell theory, and it sounds perfect. It reminds me, of course, as a crab grows and he finds his different shells and he discards the old one, and they're all beautiful shells, but he goes into a bigger and bigger shell, and then eventually he's out on his own, foraging for food and so forth. I find a strong connection, as I had said, to my ancestors, and I know it relates to religion. We've been involved in every single religion, from Egypt to Greece to Rome, to all the secret societies, and I seem to be drawn to all this. And a message I had got about 3 years ago, Sevan, and again, I was never into the occult or esoteric studies or anything at all, but I started getting into the truth conspiracy movement and so forth, and I tried to join the Freemasons, but I was precluded because of a previous felony for growing marijuana. I actually had 2 of them, and they wouldn't allow me in the lodge. And
I didn't know they didn't let you in the lodge if you have a felony.
Yeah, so anyways, I at the time I didn't really know better, but I got this communication, which was really one of the first, I wouldn't say the first ever, but I'd say it was from the spirit world, and it was a simple, we started the brotherhood. What is this all about? Are they controlling me? Are they using me as a vehicle, or am I just using my DNA computer to find myself in this life?
Well, I mean, I would definitely choose C, the DNA computer, because remember, the entire biorhythm of everyone that has ever done the ritual or gotten themselves involved into any of the rites is still going to be accessible to you. And to me, I feel like all of us are building anyway. Like, regardless of what this guy down the street, what he does is going to affect me, even if he thinks so or not. Him just breathing is going to affect me. So in that, we're all contributing to this giant chain that I would refer to more of as DNA. And we add to it through testing. And what this is really doing is ensuring our survival, like, because the DNA in its sense is the strongest seed that we have. If we are completely on the dense level obliterated, our DNA, which is the higher essence of us, will glide somewhere else, land somewhere else, sprout just like it did before, and then it'll all kick off all over again. Like, I think people are a little less optimistic about existences until they realize that that's exactly how existence comes about. But what happens also is that we get to a point where we have these older energies in a certain sense pulling us to do the spiritual thing. And that's really what it is. I wouldn't even say so much as that it's Masonic or that it's just about the rites, because I didn't hear you in a sense mention Venus. So I'm not sure if you've gotten back to Venus yet. After all, you go through all the spiritual systems here on the planet.
Real quick, just to add there, I'll add Jupiter. I keep being drawn to Jupiter, the priest of Jupiter. So you can keep going. So
exactly. So at some point, then it checks back to a planetary system, right?
Yeah.
And so I could say this is that, I may just need to take a moment here and just grab something to drink, but because I kind of have a lot to say, and then I'm just trying to cram it all down into one moment. So I'm just
go for it, Sevan. No problem. I get to do that when you're talking, and you talk so great. I'm not bored at all, and I know the audience isn't as well.
Right, and then also we always have editing, so
you got it.
Okay, so it's like this. Like, let me give you. I can only tell you from what's going on in my standpoint sometimes too, and it may be a lot more in retrospect to what exactly you're experiencing, but you'll just understand more of that. Hey, I get the same thing kind of over here too.
Sure.
And then I isolated it down to this. So let me just explain it from just when it first started, though, is because obviously, if you've read my biography, my mother was very zealous in religion, and she went through quite a few different religions, such as Islam, and then quite a few different branches of the churches, and baptized, and just a lot of experience into that whole spiritual field. And then every time you can get into one of these places, and especially if they're configured properly, when you leave there, especially as a child, you will leave with some kind of energy or something attached to you. And so what happens is that, let's say you get to an age of comprehension. This is like, it's the first part of your awakening. Now, all this stuff is going to be like trying to explain to you what it is and what it's about. And remember, one symbol can give you volumes of knowledge. So you can imagine how long this can go on. Sure. And so I started realizing that a lot of this, what was really going on, especially in Arabia, is that there was the communication with these spirits because of their knowledge. And that's why they became known as the jinn, or the geniuses. And they also became synonymous with serpents. Serpents became synonymous with trees. Trees became synonymous with knowledge. And that type of symbolism just kept rolling into itself continuously, because all of the thinking and the thoughts and the meditations, and then you get this epiphany, they say, comes from these energies that are floating throughout, looking for individuals to basically have a conversation with. And you can see how this could happen, especially if everyone arriving on the astral plane these days doesn't even seem to know what's going on. So what I'm saying is that we have a side of us that is open, and it is our spiritual side in a sense. And it is constantly encouraging us to explore and to figure out more about what is going to go on, especially after death, and especially during this life, and also to make sure that we're straight at that point. That seems to be the urgency. And by any means, if just to get us to pursue that more, even if if it needs to show us a bad dream, if it needs to give us a bad situation, that's most of the time what happens for most people. It snaps us back into figuring out, oh my goodness, God, where are you? And what am I going to do? And obviously, it's not that simple for most people, because as you go, it gets more advanced. As you start to progress and you learn a certain amount, let's say you completely cover the entire Gnostic theology, and then you think, okay, bam, that's it. And then obviously, just like I know, it just only began. And then you start seeing that this is a never-ending thing. Like, it's not even going to stop. And what even made you think it was going to stop anyway? And that's when you call Lord Governor. Now, Lord Governor is actually your body. That's why the body is not an evil thing. You just have to be the master of it. But if we're always trying to be the master of everyone else's body, you could see the problem, since the body takes so much maintenance. So Lord Governor, basically the body is what can put the soul in check and say, hey, man, switch it off for a moment. I got kids here. Or, look, there's other stuff going on beside what happened before. I'm actually creating something new. Okay, get to the point. Give me the rudimentary diagrams and things, because I'm at the level of comprehension. This is what people would call talking to themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But what if you're getting answers back? Right? Yep. And then obviously when you start reading, you start studying deeply, you do get answers back. Now, whether these answers are coming from yourself, or whether they're coming from spirits or ancestors or Anunnaki, after a while, it doesn't even matter if you're getting the truth. It's only when you're getting falsehood that you would need to discern the spirits and figure out kind of where you went wrong. And this is very easy to kind of map out, because you will know through synchronicities where that your path is continuing and you're waxing stronger, because after all, they call it degrees, because just like temperature is in degrees, if you throw someone in 100 degrees, that's only supposed to be at, let's say, 31 degrees, you're going to burn them up. That means you basically gave a person more knowledge than they can actually handle, and they just had a meltdown. And so we have to understand, of course, the terminology. The English language, of course, is structured in a way to render another level of information. But it is in the language to what happens with this kind of knowledge, especially of a spiritual nature. That's why I call it spirit. Spirit is actually a specific type of ethereal entity, more related to one of conflict. So that's the other thing about spirituality that people don't understand, is that spirit is really a generalized term. Like in the Hindu tradition, they would never generalize every entity or energy as just one thing. So a spirit in particular, which is that's like a whole genus of specific ethereal beings, those particular beings were called upon generally through warfare. Now, if you trace it back, if you look at the Bible, and there's a lot of warfare going on, there's a constant praying going on to these spirits, angels, whatever, even the high God, for the obliterating of the guy next door, basically. So obviously what you get then is you get this period that is stuck in the timeline, when we'll always remain there. And it actually is the big growing point for a lot of us. So you get this period that's stuck in the timeline of complete conflict, where all the spirits are at war with each other. And that's actually how they became spirits versus a soul. Because the word soul means solo. That's the sun. Look at it in the sky. It's beaming. It's sending its rays out everywhere, but it's not divided. That's the lesson, right? So what the spirits are they're the ones that are divided. But they're still ethereal, but they're divided. And they're divided because they don't like the other spirits. And they're still having the same issues that they had when they were even in physical bodies. In fact, this whole thing is a trial for them to see all is self. When you're ready to return to self, it's through the sun. We're all together there right now. And
it's interesting you say that, Sevan. I feel like I've been stuck in this spiritual battle for thousands of years, however long it has been on the planet Earth, and in studying my ancestors and history, and then also my DNA. I tracked it back to every single location where these stories and these wars have occurred, and I've been pretty much in the middle of all of them, but not as a warrior, but as a spiritual warrior and as a priest. And
which are the real warriors.
But I also have to step back and be a father to my 5 children, and I have to make money, and I have to live, or else I'm not going to be able to take care of them.
Right. Yeah. And then that of course makes you a real hot spot, because you're still figuring out how to actually do that, which means that you actually have ground, so you have higher amplification. You know what I mean? Because people who don't have ground, meaning they don't have those responsibilities, they don't even have that level of gaining a child to understand how your whole thing changes once you get a child, then they don't have that level of amplification. So to clarify a couple of things, just to add a few pointers into what you said.
Sure.
First of all, I'll just say at this point that you're talking to one of those individuals who I have to experience this before I can talk about it. And in every sense that this was, for me, not my plan, like coming to the radio and doing the show and all this kind of stuff. It was actually, I thought it was going to end with a book. And then after the book, you know, there was that constant voice in the mind. Have you done your best? No, I haven't. I'm also very proficient in computers. Didn't really go to school for it, but definitely can do anything on them. And there seems to be basically this apt pupil kind of thing going on, meaning that there's nothing really I can't learn. And in fact, the common sense that most people think is common, I do have. So I'll just put it like that. But then I started realizing with all of that, then we should be able to come to the conclusion that, first of all, I'm not sure how long as a human being in these kind of incarnations that any of us want to keep warring with Martians. And what I mean by that is that if you could take the planet Mars as itself as being the god of war, then anytime you would want to go into a conflict, if you're going to go into a conflict with that kind of being and you don't have any training, you think it's a game, good luck. It could be lifetimes before you realize that you've been knocked out so cold, you're like 3 or 4 dimensions deep into the foolishness, right? So this is what I want to tell people about these spiritual battles, that they're jumping on one side or another, because that's all part of the archonic game. And you know, as a Gnostic, that archons form their pact through planets. Like, they are the planets. They are the heavy, dense bodies. They are the ones that fell below the speed of light. They are the fallen. And so what they did was they created their worlds like they wanted their worlds. But that's what made them individual. That's what made them spirits, because their worlds didn't contain everything. Their worlds always lacked things. And in most of the time with the children of those beings, they always lacked the things that those children needed. Just like in your cell salt chart, if you're missing a certain salt, you got to get it, or else you exhibit a certain deficiency. So that's the whole thing with the whole genetic, is that some genetics are deficient because they're actually missing what their genetic group says they're not supposed to have. Okay? So let's think about this a little bit deeper. So what the planets are, whether it's Jupiter, whether it's Saturn, are this in the same tense of what the Mormon church is when they have different places that different mind states go to. If you're just all out broke in the ghetto, then you go Pentecostal holiness. If you may be a little upper, then you go to, what is that, the Latter-day Saints temple out there on the side with the white room with the castle, right? Yep. You go there. But if you're way beyond that, if you actually think you need to merge your powerful career along with maybe this spirituality, then you go Scientology. And then, of course, if you're just not that foolish, then you can go Dianetics, you know, and they can keep spinning it and spinning it and spinning it and spinning it, because that's how these planets are moving. They're spinning, and they got a lot of people dizzy, thinking that they're really different. So every time a person wants to do something different, then they go be Venusian. And they hang out there for a while, and then when they want to get some sense, they go be Mercurian. And then when they want to be king because they know everything, then they go Jupiterian. But then as the king gets old, he goes Saturnalian. And then he looks up and his son Jupiter's trying to take him out, so then he becomes Uranian and tips over to his side and goes to sleep again until he wakes back up again, and it happens again. See, I've seen these worlds on spin. Like, I've seen the whole design of it, and then realize how to get in and get out of it. And a big part of it, though, is through the mind. You have to steel your mind. That's why they say the steel is a strong. Steel, S-T-E-A-L, S-T-I-L-L. You have to actually take your mind back from the Archon. See, that's what actually happened to me. My awakening was my war with Shaddai. I went all the way. Like, I already knew step by step by step when I was younger. I needed to understand what happens when you die before I can live. Or else there's always like this thing hanging over my head. You see what I mean? Like, if I'm out having fun, then I'll feel this twinge in me. And then I'll be like, man, what's wrong? You're not having fun? I'll be like, man, you still don't know where it's going to happen when you die. Look at you. You're still playing around. You're out here with these people. You need to get back to your books. You see what I mean? So I always had that going on until at one point, after I had satisfied my physical pleasure, this means actually reached a stage in the world where I felt like I was doing something, I got to a void, meaning I had actually gotten enough cash to satisfy me for a while. But then I got to this spiritual void. I realized, man, what happened to all this? Man, I think I used to fly in my dreams when I was a kid. I used to control my dreams, all that kind of stuff I had forgotten about. And it was because of the advice of the more dense entities, which still may not be visible, but the more dense entities will pull you away from the world of your childhood and where all your energy is, and pull you into a world that exists with a war. Because when there's a war or warship, it's a warship. Okay? When there's a warship going on, it's going to be low density because the ground is red. The ground is red with blood. It's either the blood of the people or the blood of the animals, because they're both the same. Because the human bodies, that's clay. This clay is found in the bottom of the ocean. If you want to know who the real controller is of this planet, it's in the bottom of the ocean. That's why, and then they want to take claim over it and stake claim over it, but they cannot. It is inside of a shell. It is impenetrable. That is cedar, also known as sat. You see what I mean? That means at a certain phase when the lead, that's the most densest one, becomes a seed again to grow life, meaning that you actually become so regretful of all the things that you've done that you could give yourself life again. So I'm even asking people to do that today. Like, give yourself life again. Start thinking about what I'm talking about. Understand the game that's being played. Then realize what happens when you figure that out right now. And then you spend about one more year with that information resting inside of your processor. Mo, it's only about one more year. Meaning that all the information that you have now, especially after this conversation, it goes quantum. You know it, like just a little bit, it starts all clicking together. But trust me, the ones that have spite against us, the causing this conflict and confusion, if you want to know why they're doing it, it's because they're jealous. They did things during a certain time that is making them act a certain way. So what's really needed, the biggest job that's being offered, is an individual that understands how to convert them back to souls, meaning to take Father home.
Wouldn't people like us, Sevan, be perfect people to help influence the others that are here and they're making those same mistakes that our ancestors have made? Can't we help open their eyes and maybe change it, even though we're involved or we somehow are pulled into this war? Sometimes can we sacrifice ourselves for the greater good of all humanity, or is this just a game being played with us? Or
well, first of all, you don't actually, every day is a sacrifice in certain tenses. The thing is that you get innovative. See, that's the thing of the. Do you remember they were showing you all those heroes and all that kind of stuff? Like I said, it's just this physical plane that's hands off, because all the shells and stuff in the ocean and all this stuff's got to stay intact for the next try, the next trial, or the next gauntlet that the beings that come next will have to run as they have to figure this system out. But the reality is that what you've learned in this experience, you put your spin on it, right? Your spin. Because you'll know, are you Wittershins or are you Diesel? What is your core, right? And I can see your picture, so I know your core. You see what I mean? Like I have discernment. So from that level, then anything that you do is going to reflect you. So when you come in to balance, everything you create is balanced, and you will face no opponent. So do you see also the end of the war? Or basically when the war or the battlefield of Aranja that's taking place in your own body and your own consciousness is over, when there's a laying down of arms, when the king, who is Khan, who is the coin, who is the priest, who is the Cohen, when he is set in his true position or her true position, which is as an, intercessor. Okay? Now, what an intercessor is, and this is all happening inside of you. People need to realize that the exoteric is what they're learning. Esoteric is inside. You have a priest inside of you. And that priest speaks a language that is of cones, i.e. the Enochian language, That priest knows how to take your plight, basically mean the end of your cable up to the top of where the cable has been disconnected, and then reconnect you. You see what I mean? And that's what the Enoch was supposed to do for the fallen angels, i.e. the archons of the planets. Enoch was told to take the prayer up to God and tell God we're sorry, basically. Everyone took that literal. It's something that each individual that has become an individual will have to do in order to put themselves back into wholeness, because you start in wholeness. Like you have to start there. Remember, you start in the unbegotten. And that's the beauty of actually discovering that space. And now also, for those that say, well, wait a minute, am I going to get sucked into a vapor of my memories and blah, blah, blah? Wait, whoa. There is nothing that is not accessible in omniscience, especially your memories, meaning that you will always have the ability to live through anything that has been created. That is everything. How is that possible? That is because everything is created through the same biorhythm. Like, you live through your child because it was made from the particles from you, right? So that's the power of a subjective being on the subjective plane, is that everything we make here is made from them. That's why they're called elementals. Steel you can get a conversation on the astral plane going on with steel, iron, osmium, neodymium, all sorts of different elements that they live there. Here they sleep. You see what I mean? I said they live, we sleep. This is the dimension of sleep. So just because people are walking around, they think that they're awake. When you go to sleep and you're in your dream, you're walking around. But is that awake? What I'm saying here is that our frequency is what determines what we see and what we can do. When you bring the frequency up, while remaining in balance, you actually go into an entirely different space, and this one slows down. It's like this one starts moving in slow motion. This is what the ancestors used to call dream time. So you could go and do something for about 3 months in about 3 minutes of Earth time. You see what I mean? So I'm just giving you more of the information of what actually goes on there. But this is a space that is now becoming available in 2014. There is nothing that can shut this door of knowledge that is about to come through. Now, what Obama and all these other individuals are doing is that when the end of the game, the king and the pawns will go back in the same box. The ones that get off the cube, meaning the 64-bit I Ching, the hexagram itself, the ones who get off of that, the language of the hypercube, those will be the ones that go into the space that has already been created. The closest that we can see it as is the sun in the sky. And only imagine, though, that is just the external version. So the actual physical sun in the sky is only the external version of what I'm speaking of, because how you get to it is you don't jump in a rocket and try to fly towards it, Icarus. You have to go at it from within. So inside, and that's why we point people back towards themselves, you repair the ship. This means MBS, mind, body, and soul. I need to balance this thing out. Where do I need to work out first? So I have to take people through physical, because filters are important. All your organs are functioning like filters. They are the planets. That's why when the gods, there's a plural behind that, said, let us make them in our image. They created humans out of bodies. Okay, I'm just going to give you the whole thing really briefly so you understand. Sure. To find the organs, the actual designs to the bodies, you'll find them inside of the shells in the ocean. The shells, and I can produce to you, and I will, especially on the first season of the first show of Astral Quest, show you all the images of the shells that are actually our organs in our body. But they're in some kind of incubation phase. So when you see those people out in Egypt, or actually what's on the walls of Egypt, well, actually that even got there just recently, but when you look into Angkor Wat, thank you, we'll get to something that is actually more authentic, you will see the process of taking the bodies and beginning to combine the bodies. That's when you get the animal head and the physical body, and But where are the organs? The organs are inside. So where are these organs coming from? The organs are coming from the ocean. That's what the magic was then. The first building of that cadmium, the first body. Okay? But the organs and all of that came from the ocean. Now, those organs, which are also planets, they're on a specific spin or orbit, came from, in a sense, the essence of what we're calling the planets. So let me just rewind here. When the first body was created, this was, again, the archonic forms coming into an agreement to come into physicality. That physical body is then created with organs. These organs are later replicated continuously as there's the reproduction. There's a continuous replication of these organs. So now every human being has a heart, a liver, a spleen, etc. that corresponds to a planet, right?
Right.
So now they're inside of us then, and they're alive. The organ plays its tone, frequency, and that's what I was saying about that whole I like it a certain way. So this specific frequency of the heart is its specific frequency, right? And then the genitals, the bowels, etc. They all have their own frequencies. But so they are in the universe. They're united, uni, in conflict, verse. Verse also coming from the term veer, which means to turn, to veer off. Okay, so also turn is to mean the oob or a corner, etc. So this is where you get the geometry from. So basically, you have these planets that are inside of you that are on these specific frequencies, but even those frequencies fluctuate one after another because the planets are at war with each other. When you drink something through the mouth, let's say some alcohol, that really the mind wants, it goes to war with the liver, which is also another planet, right? So then the liver then toxifies and fires back at the mind by, if you're completely toxic, you can't really even think clear. You see what I mean? So this is how the planets also show out in their religions, is that all the gods are at war with each other. We just, in the US, just one god is winning. But if you go to the Hindu tradition, you'll see the gods are always warring with each other. And then one of them, Indra, left. And that later on became known as Yahweh. You see what I mean? And he left and went and started a whole new group of people, right? Mm-hmm. But not really a new group of people. People leaving from the Indus Valley or Angkor Wat are the same people that are in Costa Rica, the same people that we're calling Indians, the same people that we're calling Native Americans. The same people that we're calling you go on, it's only by the hair. You cut the hair and you look at it under a microscope and you can tell the ether of the individual. So you can tell if a person is actually coming from the same genealogy for real, not the fake genealogy things that they're doing now. When you have to narrow it down to only 7 choices, really 9, which is what does it look like once it comes out the prism? Because once the clear light goes in the prism, right, then it comes out with 7 colors, right? That 7 colors is the division. That is the 7 planets. That's the 7 days of the week, etc. So that's how they run the exoteric system. But the esoteric system is 9, because black and white are also colors. And the ones that work the esoteric system use the symbol black and white. That's why that's the chief colors in Masonry. It is to control from the opposite sides of the spectrum, but still contained in the matrix. As the God says, I am God, but it's saying that inside of the universe. It's like, come on. So what you're dealing with here again is that inside of the prism or prison, if you understand, if a person went to Egypt, they were going to prison. If someone told you back in the day you were going to be going to Egypt, you were going there to prison because the beings that lived there were slave gods. Anytime one steps forth as king, it means that everyone else is less. That's why even in the Talmud, it shows you that when you're, I guess, speaking with, I don't know, Enki or Enlil, the good one, the bad one, who knows, he says, you don't take a king. And then people say, well, we want a king. So they took Saul. Saul is salt. Salt is Saturn. The covenant is by salt. Saturn is a cube, incubation. Then Saturn confuses with languages, okay? Let us go down and confuse them. What does he use to confuse them? Languages. So bam, 70 languages come out. So this is the confusion of tongues. Now people are not speaking anymore what they understand that they're saying. This is Kabbalah. Kabbalah, basically, if you don't understand Kabbalah, if you don't understand the cable of your language, how the A connects to the Z, or basically the real meaning of every single language, then you're confused within the language because you're using a language to think. When you say, I need to go to the bathroom, you actually say that. But when the baby says, I need to go to the bathroom, it doesn't say that, but it goes to the bathroom. So what language is it using? The supreme language. What is the supreme language? It's something like an instinct. It moves fast. And so that's what I was saying about this whole matrix. The matrix got nothing but games. It'll count it up to Googleplexes. The languages will get more complex. They'll keep talking about how it's going to get better and better, but it's still moving in one direction, and that should be understood. We can slow it down. We can even freeze it. We can even rewind it. You see what I mean? Like, we need to understand the position of this for a real being that is awake in a human body. This stops when you want it to. Think about it. You're in complete control of your consciousness. At some point, you can choose to believe nothing and only be happy. And it will soar your body into a high frequency if you're really happy. The only problem is our definition of happiness and the experiences that we've had on this planet govern now. When we say we're happy, we don't even feel it because we don't even know what happy feels like, because the organ that actually corresponds to happy is already dead. And that's, again, all planets. That's why I say, well, why is Saturn the king of the planets? First of all, you had to read it from the alchemical standpoint. That's not what it says. What it says is all elements eventually become lead if they don't actually make it above the speed of light, which is monatomic. So what it's saying is that all of these organs in our body will eventually putrefy into this black ash. And that ash, when grinded down, will be the shape of a cube if you look at it under a microscope. It's very dense and it's non-responsive to light. So we are responsible for keeping ourselves consistently infused with the energy that is not like that. You see what I mean? So if we go into this, like I said, you got Saturn aliens running around everywhere. They're just basically non-optimistic people. They're dead inside. They're not really feeling anything. That's why we have to work through the physicality, because all their organs are dead. Now we have to rejuvenate the planet. We have to basically resurrect the God. And it makes perfect sense, though. I mean, if you, as a Gnostic, it would definitely make perfect sense. But you have to resurrect all of the organs. Then they come back online. They actually play their original. Once you get them to play their original frequency and they all come into harmony, you're back on Mount Harmon again. This is where you actually rewind time to the agreement that made you a fallen angel at the Mount of Hermon, when the 33rd of the stars were there and then fell through an agreement. You see what I mean? That's why I said, Semyaza said, I don't think you guys are going to do this once you really figure out what this is going to be about. So I'm going to bind you to an oath. So he bound them by an oath on the Mount of Harmon, which is where we get our word harmony. That harmonic scale actually consists of 9 tones, no matter what anyone is saying. It's kind of proof of it within the color spectrum versus any of this digital knowledge that they keep shooting out. You see what I mean? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the books are open. Behold, like this is the time in which we're living in. Like we have this potential that is so much more massive than what we've been taught. The only thing that is needed now is the energy that gives the individual the ability to do that. And I'm telling you, first, you got to do it through the body. Clean out all the organs, this internal cleansing kit cleans out all the organs. Then the mind, understand the real truth of what you just write down the list of questions. We've opened up 24-hour help desk on realmdynamics.com. That's actually, it's about to open up because we know we want to really create the knowledge base first, so we can just point people to the links. But there's no questions that can't really be answered, but get all the whats, whens, wheres, whys. Those are the W's. That's the wilderness. To get out of the wilderness, you need to get all the answers to those questions as being an American. Because American is a bird, right? Like it sits. You see the eagle, right? That is the same eagle that was over there in the Eastern tradition. It means they reside on the crown of the consciousness. The only problem with this is that if it doesn't dive, that's why the next symbol was, well, this is really a phoenix, right? But that's not what everyone's told now. This is not a phoenix. This is an eagle. An eagle is an ego. He's way up there. He's flying up there. He's never going to come down. But a phoenix actually will come down at a certain point. That means you have to come down to the other chakras because that is your foundation. That is the chariot. Understand the positions, though. You have the chariot. You have the horse. And you have the rider. This is the threefold position of yourself. Right? And the reason, again, each piece has its importance, but I only want to speak of the horse because the lower levels of your body, your intestines and all this kind of stuff is pushing out the energy that is necessary to even keep you walking around. But notice how the most powerful beings are always the ones getting ridden on. Think about it. Like the horse is way stronger than a man. You can probably you see some pictures, they ride astride a lion. If you go to the astral plane, there's riding astride of different things because there's been agreements. But what I'm telling you is that there's a connection between the bottom part of yourself, keeping your intestines, your bowels and things healthy. And then the higher intellect of yourself, making sure it doesn't forget about the lower areas, also the center of yourself, etc. So it's the will thing that I was explaining again earlier, and I don't want to get long-winded about it. So I'm just going to, be quiet for a moment and just hear what you have to say about all that. I just
sure.
I went on one of those tangents, man. All right, I'm back.
No, it's great, and you could flow, and that shows just how knowledgeable you are, Sevan, on all this stuff, and you definitely have me enthralled. One thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here shortly would be love and being happy again. That's one of the hardest things for me. It's not necessarily the love, but being happy. I try all the time and it just seems like it's difficult. And the answer that I keep getting when I ask for these answers is you're not going to be happy until you help free yourself and your kids and future ancestors from these archons and this magic. Because I help, I believe, set this up. And I'm able to break free, even though I haven't reached the self-work like you have. But I feel like I've been tasked to reverse this magic, this 33rd degree oath, and to fulfill it.
Well, let me explain it because I got that transmission too. And this is the real deal. First of all, that's the accuser. And that's why they call him the accuser. And this being is a duke. And that's why I was talking about the astral plane. Once you see it all, you'll be like, oh my goodness. But the accuser constantly is attempting to place the burdens of man in which he suggested on the back of man. Meaning that, oh, you have to fix this. Oh, you have to fix this. But you're fixing it into a reality that constantly decays. It's like the Hugo. It's the Tinker toy that basically, as long as we keep playing with it, just keeps falling apart because we're using the wrong tools. Because happiness, and that's what the tool would be, you would need to transfer to them a very vivid force. It's like Shakti. And it actually feels orgasmic. You have to radiate that like human orgone into the reality, and that would, of course, feel very good. To achieve that, do not fool yourself into believing that it's something that just has to be done with a task that, especially on a physical level, to something external. It is something internal, but don't believe it's just as simple as somebody saying, hey, you have to find happiness within. Oh, my goodness, get away from me. Because it actually, that's why I said we hit it from the physical point first, because there's an organ that is tied into happiness, and it is the first one to get extinguished by a big bag of Jolly Ranchers. It is the first one to get extinguished by a nice tube of Colgate at 6 years old. You see what I mean? So there is some work that has to be done on the body in order for it to feel that actual expression, not even to the degree of what you think it is, but to the degree of what it really is. So, I mean, because that's the whole thing. And that's what kind of separate us is that once we become separated within, when we can no longer really feel the organ, then the organ can't actually feel. You see what I mean? And this is something that it'll make more sense. And I'll definitely send you some stuff on it, but it'll make more sense as you research a little bit more. But there's a process, though. Like some people already tell me, oh, I've already internally cleansed and I'm still body. Okay, you got that done? Mind. Okay, you're done? Now you need to understand the difference between the spirit and a soul. And then that thing unlocks. That's why you can still count on the triangulation. I talked today about certain things in threes, but triangulation at least allows you to pinpoint where things are. And so with the mind, body, soul technique, you can pinpoint, okay, let me go here, and then it turns on. This is not a fake thing. I will tell you, it is real. Once you get the proper calibration, it is real. We are working every day to figure that out. Obviously, each individual is different. But realistically, a lot of people are being exposed to the same thing. That's why much of what you said today about what your experience is the things that I've experienced, Mo. Like, this is what they were doing to me. I'm just trying to figure out the truth. You see what I mean? I'm not here trying to woo somebody and make them believe and maybe donate to my news network or something like that. You see what I mean? What I'm here for is to figure out what happens after you die. So in that, I went through all of this because this is what you have to go through. And then when you get into those top ranks, which is where you're at now, you're dealing with the actual entities themselves. They are battling your mind for control over it. But then when you know that, that's how simple it is. And that's just like how the abilities you will gain will be. It'll be so easy for you to change someone's life and put it back into balance in such a short period of time or a moment with them. And it's through this same method, because right now you're battling and warring with different consciousnesses in your own structure, but also those same consciousnesses are only warring against you because of things that you may have done to them. But the reason why you feel like that, though, is what you could have been doing to them is you could have ate one of them. You see what I mean? Or you could have been coerced to eat something, broke kind of one of them. You see what I mean? And so it will manifest in the mind. It's just like the dream. The dream will manifest as things, and you see it in the dream, but that doesn't exactly mean it's exactly what it is unless you're what they call dreaming true. You see what I mean? So what happens, though, is to see it actually clearly, it's your organs telling you. Saturn, the organ, the bowels is saying, yo, colon cleanse. Okay, no colon cleanse. Let's do some nightmares. And then I'm telling you, like, all of this system, I wouldn't say I figured it out. I don't want to say that at all, because there are volumes on this, but I'm an American that came to other Americans and said, look, man, we've been bamboozled. They didn't even give us the diagram to the template of our own body. And what happened is that we ate so much stuff, and especially with these companies, because these companies were owned by Shriners. And that's the question, again, like if you will actually feel any type of flux going on, that you feel pressure to do something, is that you got to realize that it was really the companies, the entities that were formed by certain men, and they may even just signed a certain contract of being a worker in that company, and that company dealing out all these different products and things like that. Like if you look at the Lipo, the Shriner, the ancient Shriners are the ones that went to the U.S. They own the railways, they own the power stations, they own the entire backbone to the America. You see what I mean? But they are bound to the gene, and that is just another episode, my friend. But that was, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
We have to take it back east. But yeah, man, just, obviously you have my contact information. I had a definitely awesome time talking to you, and we obviously connected in a very good way. I feel like we shared a couple things that people would like to hear, and they can obviously check us out at resistance2010.com. But yeah, man, it's great being on Gnostic Warrior Radio.
Yes, Sevan, it has been a great pleasure. I've learned a couple things from you, and to take me on my path to that next level. And I really appreciate your honesty, and I know the audience does as well. Take care to you, brother.
Thanks, Mo. Have a great evening.